Hi, Kelly. Welcome to Food Integrity Now.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, I am so excited to have you on the show. As I said on my blog post just a little bit ago, I talked about the fact that I was going to interview you, and stay tuned. And I said, in my world, you're famous. So I'm really, I'm really glad to have you on the show, and just to share with us some of your knowledge about what has happened and what is happening with some of the glyphosate Monsanto trials. So
Oh, sure.
give us just a little bit of your background of how you started blogging and creating Glyphosate Girl.
Sure. So, like many people that are suddenly interested, I think, in glyphosate, I was having chronic health issues and came to a time when I realized that they were linked to gluten. And so I went to a conference actually at the Columbia Celiac Center. And they were talking, it was a bunch of scientists and doctors, and they were saying, we just don't know. If you purify gluten, you don't have the same inflammatory effect as you do when you eat non-purified gluten. I'm like, that's interesting. They're like, there must be something else on this grain that is causing this inflammatory response in some people. And so truly it must have been just someplace in the back of my mind. I was like, I think that they spray Roundup on wheat and grains, but by no means had much knowledge on it. So I went to the microphone and I was like, wait, don't they spray Roundup on the wheat? And everyone looked at me super blankly and they're like, what? Even these scientists are studying, they're like, what could it be? Okay. So I was like, yeah, I think so. And so that opened up like the entire thing. And I was like, okay, no one seems to know about this, or they're not talking about it. They might know about it, but it's scary to talk about. And there happened to be someone from General Mills there talking about a gluten-free oat and how like they source them for Cheerios and how challenging it is to make sure that they're gluten-free. And so he was like, can I talk to you for a second? And over in like the back corner of this conference, and he's like, we see that there's going to be a problem with Roundup, but it's going to take a few decades to get our providers to our suppliers to stop using it because it's so critical in agriculture. I was like, a few decades? Like, what are you talking about, a few decades? You can just decide right now to stop. And he said, well, that's just the way it is, but we understand. So you're being heard. And I was like, okay, well, that's good. And I think now we know General Mills is a little more progressive than other places. So I left, and then I was like, gosh, I've got to prove that gluten sensitivity is coming from Roundup. Let me look. So I go into PubMed and I came across Anthony Samsel and Stephanie Seneff, and I was like, oh, they've already done the work. And how strange, this is the only paper on this. And so sweetly, Stephanie was willing to meet with me. So I went to see her at MIT, and she kind of gave me the lay of the land. And I was like, okay, lo and behold, this trial starts happening. I didn't realize that this trial was coming up. And fortunately, it was in San Francisco, which is very close to me. I was like, I need some kind of catchy name to get some readership, because my goal was to get enough readership that I could then go afterwards and fundraise to do more research on Roundup and glyphosate. And so I was like, I'm going to try and make this super entertaining and people be engaged, and then they'll want to fund. The research doesn't exist. And so I went up the first day. Actually, it was like pre-trial. So the trial wasn't opening yet. And
This is just so our listeners know, you're talking about the Johnson versus Monsanto trial.
Yes, that's right. The first one. And so it was summer of 2018. And so I drove up to San Francisco and went, and I had like signs with me because I was going to protest. And I assumed that there'd be a big protest, because who doesn't protest against Monsanto? And there was no one there at all except for lawyers.
Oh my goodness.
I walked in, and I walked like right on through. I'm like, am I even allowed? I know nothing about law. Am I even allowed to walk through this courthouse and go to a courtroom, or is that private or what? And so I walked right in, and there was Baum Hedlund, like so nice and welcoming, Michael Baum. Let's see, Bobby Kennedy was there, and then, all of their lawyers, Monsanto's lawyers. And I went up to Judge Bolanos and I said, is it okay if I blog about this? Would that be all right? And I didn't once again realize, of course, it's open. You can go in and write as much as you want. And I was determined to do it because at the time, Monsanto was making sure a very, very limited access to what was going down in the trial was going to happen. So they only allowed a couple of days of filming, which was the opening statements, the closing statements, and the verdict. And I was like, but so much is going to happen in between. Who's going to talk about it? And later on, I found out that the lawyers on our side were very suspicious of me because I'm just the kind of person Monsanto might send to try and like get in there and like get the inside dirt for them and report back. Like,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
spy.
Yeah, exactly.
Who comes in one day out of nowhere and is like named Glyphosate Girl? You know,
Yeah.
it's very at the time I was like, oh, I'm your Glyphosate Girl. And so that's how it all started. And then I was like, oh gosh, this is really important stuff. I've got to come every day. So I like cleaned out my calendar and spent that summer just sitting in there reporting everything I was seeing. And I was just blown away to the point that I was still, when I went into it, I didn't really know that GMOs were specifically designed to be Roundup ready, and they were designed intentionally to sell more. I didn't know that explains the big explosion in use. And I didn't realize that the EPA is actually super corrupt. And so I think that might have been a fun thing. People have told me reading my blog, because when you're not in this world, you don't really know that case.
Yeah.
These issues. But when I was learning at the same time, I think it's a lot of my readers. And so it improved my readership.
Yeah.
So then, since then, so I went to, obviously the Johnson trial, did the.
And how long was that? 7, 8 weeks? What was it?
Yeah. So that was a 8-week.
8 week?
And every day. I mean,
my
it was
goodness.
a lot.
That's commitment, Kelly. That's
it was commitment. I can tell you, it was not all very exciting.
I'll bet.
A lot of the study, I mean, it would be hours just with, one study and debating back and forth the which is accurate, which is not, which is false, which, the different
yeah.
which is best. And but I can say, since I felt like sort of I was a juror because I was being presented both sides, oh my God, Monsanto was just screwed from the beginning, because even when not much evidence could be brought into trial, it still was so overwhelmingly bad, their behavior, that it wasn't a total shock that they won, to say the least.
Yeah.
I was a little more concerned actually in the Hardiman trial, because it was such a lean jury in that one.
Yeah. And what was the award on the Hardiman trial?
That was it 83 million? I think
83.
around there.
Yeah, and the Johnson, the initial one, which we're going to talk about the appeal in a second, but the initial award was what?
It was 289.
That's right.
289 million.
200,
and then the judge hit that down. What was it? The judge hit it down.
87 or something like that. Or?
Yeah, and then lower down to 20.5 recently.
Oh, okay, let's talk about that, because Monsanto appealed.
Yes.
And so tell us about what's happening there, and just kind of the details about that.
So yes, Monsanto appealed, and this has been a 2-year process. I mean, it's really unbelievable how long it takes to get to the appeal process. I mean, 2 years. And let's see, and Mike Miller, so there was a hearing, I don't remember, sometime this summer.
Yes.
And both sides were presenting their point of view, and Bayer definitely brought in some very eloquent and persuasive attorneys, I thought. And who was his name? I don't know, but a Bayer attorney. And it was all on phone. And did a really interesting job trying to change around the story. And, Monsanto didn't really act too poorly. This is, unnecessary punitive damages. And the evidence is very shaky that this really causes cancer, and, back to the same old party lines they always give. And Mike Miller, so Mike Miller and the Miller firm are the ones that originally had Lee Johnson as a client. And so they primarily represent them. So
Yes.
Mike Miller, who is now back and healthy, as we know, he defended him and gave a lot of great arguments, once again, citing, the ghostwriting and all the poor behavior of Monsanto. And it was interesting listening to that because I felt like there were 3 judges that were on the panel, and it really sounded like they were really trying to help Mike Miller along. Like they had already read everything really carefully. It looked so bad for Monsanto. And so the line of questioning sounded like, okay, it's yours to lose. So that's great. And they did come through then, as we know, last week.
Yes.
And they upheld the verdict, which is a huge, huge relief.
Oh my God, I was so happy. I was so happy for Lee Johnson and his family and for all the other plaintiffs, because
right?
If this didn't go this way, this could have been tragic.
Oh my gosh. And at this point, it seems like everything is so corrupt that I wouldn't have been shocked if someone whispered in the ear and suddenly it had been overturned,
Yeah, I know. Isn't that sad that we, with our regulators and the judicial system, we're not shocked.
No,
when it's
no, at all. Yep.
Yep, that's what they do, but that's really sad. But they did the right thing in this instance.
They did the right thing.
Yeah.
What's not feeling so great, though, is how much they cut the award down.
And it's 22?
Yeah, it's 20.5.
20.5.
10.25. It's interesting because the different courts have different ideas. And so with this court, it's always been, so you would have the punitive damages be at a 1-to-1 ratio with the compensatory damages. So it could never be higher than the 10.25, the punitive damages.
Yeah.
But that's differed in the federal and Piliad case.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so low. I mean, disappointingly low. And my guess is, in fact, maybe it was, I don't know whether it was announced or I read it, but I'm sure that both sides will be appealing. So now we'll wait and go to the next level, which would be the California Supreme Court, and then it's the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay. So we're not finished here.
We're not finished. Can you imagine? So was that going to take 2 more years to get to the California Supreme Court, and then 2 more years, and poor Lee Johnson is just there, trying to live.
Yeah. How's she doing?
So he's remarkable. I was actually talking to the plaintiff, or the expert witness, Dr. Nabhan, who testified in all the trials as the oncologist. And he said it absolutely is beyond remarkable that Lee Johnson is still up and about. And just from knowing Lee a little bit, I am certain that we can all take a lesson that is his attitude. I mean, it is amazing. His attitude is so positive, and he's giving so much love out, and he's just not letting him get him down, and he's still very much suffering as well.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing,
isn't it?
Absolutely amazing, and he's a hero in my book.
Such a hero.
Yeah,
and a nice guy, which helps.
Yeah. So anyway, so this happened, and then the next step, it goes to the California Supreme Court, and then it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay. Wow. It would be cool in a way. I don't know. Tell me from your perspective if you agree with this. If it did go all the way, and then we won at the Supreme Court level, the highest level.
Could that happen? I've been trying to visualize what that's like. That would be so...
Keep visualizing it.
I am. I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that would be so victorious. Oh gosh.
Yeah. So did you actually attend via telephone? The
Yes.
Okay. So, and how long was that?
That was not that long. I would say an hour. Probably.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was really short because they didn't really rehash all the details of the case, really.
Yeah. And so our listeners know, so Monsanto, what were the charges against Monsanto? Malice?
Of course, malice.
Yeah,
of course, malice. Let's see, they had also claimed, I wrote this down, let's see, so the judges specifically turned down Monsanto's claims that were given during that meeting, that they said there was a lack of scientific consensus, a lack of corporate malfeasance. No, they actually did all those things. There is scientific consensus overwhelmingly. Yes. And one person I really enjoyed talking to, you might enjoy talking to too, is Dr. Zhang, who is researcher at Berkeley, and she's
Z-A-N-G?
Chang, Zhang,
Zhang. Oh, okay. For some reason, that's
Zhang.
familiar. Yeah.
And she is someone that actually served in the EPA scientific advisory panel on glyphosate in 2016. And she was in charge of looking over the epidemiology and then making a recommendation as an outside scientist. What does the research say? Which is a process that the EPA has to make sure that, you know, they're always independent people looking. And so she said, oh my gosh, this definitely shows that it is a carcinogen. It is causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She gave that advice. And then, of course, the EPA said, thank you for all your work. And we don't find it to be a carcinogen. And so what she did is she went and she collected a few of the other scientists that were there at that EPA meeting, and they published their own paper, which is probably why it's familiar to you.
Yeah, I think I've seen that study. Yeah.
And she's continuing she's nearing retirement, but she really is so determined on this topic. It's just so outrageous what's happened with the corruption of science.
Wow, that's amazing. So what's happening with the class action suit?
So the class action, we could talk a little bit about the proposed settlement that happened a few weeks ago.
Yes.
So
10, what was that, 10 billion or?
Yeah, this long-awaited settlement. So the core lawyer teams, there are a few, had finally worked out a settlement number. And then separate to that, there was another class action that was it was a different set of lawyers, and they wanted to, you know, effectively grab a hold of some of this cash, clearly, that in the settlement. And so it was an idea that they set up and structured very creatively that for future non-Hodgkin's lymphoma victims, potential victims, that they would fall under this one category, and their ultimate verdict would be dependent upon a science panel that Bayer and the plaintiff side would put together. And they would spend a few years looking through all the research to just determine whether or not glyphosate and Roundup are carcinogenic.
Oh, God.
I mean, the most outrageous thing. It sounds exactly like what Monsanto has always done and pharma's always done with getting these panels together that are sort of mysterious to make the determination.
Yeah.
And, you know, Judge Chabria, who's in charge of the MDL, the federal cases, but also sort of the overall picture of the whole lawsuit. The reason why he bifurcated the federal trial for Hardiman, bifurcation means that they cut it into two, and they had, in the first half of the trial, they had all of the science only, with none of the corruption discussed, none of the horrible behavior. And then when that was through, then and only then, if it was a yes, we think that glyphosate causes cancer, then they could go into the rest, which is sort of the punitive damages component of just how much they knew and how much they were hiding and all of that. So Judge Chabria, I think, was proud of this intellectual exercise of dividing it up. And, you know, he is a very intellectual man, also super funny, but hasn't always seemed to be necessarily all that favorable towards the plaintiff side. But I think when he read that, he must have flipped his lids. He's like, we just had the scientific consensus showed, and the jury voted that glyphosate is a carcinogen. So you're telling me you're going to take that verdict and just decide in an independent, strange panel, like off to the side for all future cases? It just is such. So then, anyway, they withdrew that whole, like the next day, they withdrew the entire settlement plan. So now it's back to the drawing board, apparently, for that.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead.
There was also no labeling on the bottle, which they're claiming is because the EPA won't let them label it. You know, meanwhile, it leaves them wide open for future litigation. So it's so strange to me, because you could always be then claiming it with all the different types of cancers. It's just non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah, I think I read on, I think it was on US Right to Know yesterday, that with that settlement, had it had been accepted, the average plaintiff would get like $160,000,
Oh yeah,
which is not enough.
not enough at all. It's
Not
so
enough for
sad.
people whose lives have been wrecked because of this dangerous herbicide.
Absolutely. It
Yeah,
really isn't.
yeah,
Yeah, that barely covers, if it does at all, the
yeah,
suffering, the medical bills. And I'm sure that
yeah,
there's actually, I know from some of my readers, there's frustration because, Johnson, Hilliard, and Hardiman are exempt from that settlement group. And so they will likely get a higher payout. And that's hard to understand, sort of why did they get it and we don't? And so that's frustrating too.
well, there's 125,000 cases.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot to divide among. And also, did
yeah,
it really cause their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma? And I guess that's sort of going to be part of the settlement process where you determine how likely was it, looking through your records,
yeah,
that
yeah,
it was Roundup versus something else.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the other thing. That's hard. It can't be that all of those cases were, but it's hard to know,
Well, yeah, it's like, I get that they kind of have to look at each one individually.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd have to.
I could see how Bear would think it's in their best interest to do this class action now.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's hugely in their best interest.
Saves them a ton of money and
Yeah.
it's done with. It doesn't have to be an ongoing, they're the bad guys
Absolutely.
and publicity wise and stuff.
And then Bayer is also dealing with this recent class action for securities fraud.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They have that one, which it should be. Those things were
Yeah.
sold, those bonds were sold with no due diligence, clearly no due diligence. No investor would have bought those up to support the acquisition of Monsanto, knowing what was coming.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
there's an internal document that Dan Goldstein says, who's the doctor at Monsanto, says that we're on our way to being corporate roadkill. And this was years ago. If that had been uncovered, I'm pretty sure that Bayer might have still acquired them, but the investors wouldn't have been willing to buy the bonds that funded the acquisition of Monsanto.
Yeah.
So
I keep wondering though, what's the real reason this all happened?
interesting.
There are a lot of theories and stuff, and I don't have the answer, but in the back of my mind, I think,
Do you mean
there's a
create the sickness, cure the sickness?
well, yeah, that's the obvious one, but I don't know. I think there's more. And anyway, I have some theories. So
I want to hear your theories.
no.
What are your theories?
I want to be able to articulate them better.
Oh, okay. In
So
the future,
in the future,
I'll interview
yeah.
you.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, Kelly, I love what you're doing, and if to our listeners, if you've not been on her blog, it's not some boring thing that you're just going to be reading about research and blah blah blah. It's very creative. It's funny. And you're not the only one doing it now, right? You have someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So cool. So our juror Bob Howard, he was a juror on the Johnson trial, and he read my blog afterwards, and this was fun, I think, for a lot of them. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you saw what I saw!" Like, it was fun for them to rehash through my writing.
Yeah.
They weren't allowed to read it, obviously, during the trial.
Yeah.
And so Bob and I just started talking and everything, and he turned out to be such a strong writer. And actually, when there was question whether or not the verdict was going to be upheld the first time with Judge Bolanos, he was one of the people that wrote a letter to her and said, "This is why we want you to uphold the verdict."
Yeah,
and
I remember that. Yeah.
And then the newspapers wouldn't publish it. And so he's like, "Would you mind?" And I was like, "I'd be happy to." So then I got those published. And I was like, "Gosh, you guys are all great writers." I can see that everyone had said they're a very smart jury, and they definitely are. And so then Bob became my writing partner, and so a lot of the times he'll cover it, and I just love seeing his perspective from what he was presented throughout all of these trials. He has very strong opinions, and it's fun to read. So he's also writing a book, which is going to be cool to see what happened in the deliberation room.
Oh, wow, wow, wow. Can't wait. I'll have to interview him when that book comes out then.
Oh yeah, totally.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for the work you do. And again, Kelly's blog is glyphosategirl.com. Check it out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised and you'll learn some things too.
Oh,
So
thank you. That's really sweet.
continue your great work. And, this education is not finished. As
No.
Kelly and I were talking before we started recording, and I said, I still meet people who do not know what glyphosate is. And you said you meet people that don't know what Roundup is, which
A lot. A lot.
is in our world, it's, that's all we talk about it. But
Yeah.
a lot of people just have no clue. So until everybody knows about it and everybody understands how dangerous it is, until it gets banned, our work is not done.
Absolutely not. We'll keep on going.
Okay. Well, thank you again. And
Thank you for having me.
yeah,
fun.
just really appreciate everything you do. And anyway,
You too.
so thanks and continue the great work.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.